Hi, my name is Christian Devine, and welcome to Retro Review, a safe zone for physical media. I know it's been a while, we haven't talked, and that's my fault. Life, work, the world, and everything, of course, and I hope you're all doing well. And that does not mean that I have not been partaking of said physical media, and once again, it definitely is a topic in the air right now as some companies decide to not release physical media, some stores decide to not sell it anymore, while boutique labels like Arrow and Indicator and Imprint and Scream Factory and so many others are releasing amazing discs. So it is a golden age, so to speak, of physical media. And I have a lot of things on the docket for Retro View. And just because it's the 40th anniversary of this particular film, I thought it would be interesting to do a retro review on a film that I'm actually rather ambivalent about, despite its massive cultural popularity. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with retro review, is to look at film from my particular point of view, as uninteresting or interesting as it may be, but more just to let people know what it was like when the film came out, which is a more objective way of looking at it. I can dislike a film or not engage or love a film, and other people can not love it or love it. And I can be, yes, I understand that. And this particular film, I know that it was, the audience was in love with it from the very first moment. And I like quite a bit of things about it, but I'm very ambivalent about other things. And we are large, we contain multitudes. And so I thought it would be interesting once again to look back at that Friday night when I went to go see that film with my friends and tell you exactly how I felt about it then, and how sorry I am that my friends had to be there with me to hear me talk about my complaints about the film so we would all go see. But these are fun debates and engaging, and I'm not here to tell somebody that what they love is not what they love and they shouldn't love it, because I love fandom and I love that this film has its fandom, and I'm a fan too. And the game that I wrote for, Life is Strange, has its own fan base, and that's a wonderful thing to have. And if I have some ambivalence about this film when I look back in my memory, and even now rewatching it, well, who am I going to call?
Coming to save the world this summer.
Yes, Ghostbusters from 1984. What more can one say about Ghostbusters? What more should one say? What does one more need to be said? And like I said, it's still kind of a fascinating, to me, cultural phenomenon that's, sprung forth collectively that opening night when I saw it. And so I will tell you exactly what I thought about Ghostbusters opening night. And I was already prepared to love Ghostbusters because I was a fan of Ivan Reitman, actually, the director who had previously done Meatballs and Stripes, two films both starring Bill Murray, which I quite enjoyed. And Ivan Reitman was also a pretty cool genre fan. So his first film was called Cannibal Girls with Eugene Levy and Andrea Martin, a kind of a horror comedy. And he produced Heavy Metal, the animated cartoon movie, the prepubescent dream film of every 15-year-old proto boy. And with all of its flaws, Heavy Metal is a pretty awesome movie, and I'm definitely going to do a retro review on that at some point. So I give Ivan Reitman a lot of props, and when I first heard about Ghostbusters, just heard the title and saw the logo, that to me was like total, the 80s term high concept comes to mind. Of course, I was also aware there was a TV Saturday morning kids show called Ghostbusters.
We're the Ghostbusters. I'm Spencer. He's Tracy. I'm Kong.
And Columbia Pictures did indeed buy the rights eventually to the show because they just could not come up with a better title. And it's a fantastic title. I was already a fan of Dan Aykroyd and particularly Harold Ramis, who was one of the creators of the Second City TV series, which to my mind is still the greatest TV comedy series of all time. And just so brilliant. I mean, when you have John Candy and Joe Flaherty and Dave Thomas and Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy and Rick Moranis and Martin Short and Dave Thomas, that's an amazing cast of crew, and they really created an amazing universe with that show, and I highly recommend you check it out sometime. Their parodies are just the most pitch perfect parodies of all time, and Harold Ramis was part of the original season before he left. And he was also the co-writer of Animal House and other films, and directed Caddyshack, etc. And then Rick Moranis, of course, from Second City TV, so I was already there. And Sigourney Weaver, who, is my queen, so I thought that was fantastic casting. And if anybody could kind of match wits and strength with Bill Murray, it's Sigourney Weaver, and she totally does, because I think she's kind of she really holds the movie together and steals a lot of it for me. And Annie Potts, who I've always liked in film, and William Atherton, who, of course, plays the Environmental Protection Agency bad guy, was set up to be a star in the 70s. He was actually the star of Steven Spielberg's first motion picture, The Sugarland Express, and he was in other films. Terrific actor, and then got kind of pigeonholed in the 80s as the ultimate yuppie asshole. Yuppie is not a word they really use too much anymore, but I guess it's the 80s equivalent of boomer. And he does play a fantastic prick, so to speak. And I loved the look of the film, and I knew they had an amazing special effects crew behind the film. Richard Edlund and Randall William Cook, who did the amazing stop-motion dogs, and all sorts of people who, as a nerd, a special effects nerd, I was very familiar with. And Elmer Bernstein did the music, and one of my top favorite composers, John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith, John Barry, and Elmer Bernstein, and he did some fantastic 80s theme music, and his score for Heavy Metal is like one of the greatest underrated fantasy film scores ever. So if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And he did the music for Animal House, and that kind of got his career going in kind of comedy films, and he knows exactly how to play. The Ghostbusters have this really jaunty cinematic theme, and then when it gets dark and scary, the music knows exactly when to do that in a very catchy way. And of course, speaking of catchy, you can't not talk about the film, and it's one of its biggest strengths, which is that theme song.
Something strange in your neighborhood. Who you gonna call?
It certainly must be the greatest theme song ever written for a movie. I mean, I just can't think of another one that was written specifically that has that kind of power, and I personally never get sick of hearing it. And Huey Lewis probably felt the same way, because he later sued, and they settled out of court because the song did have similarities to I Want a New Drug, which Ray Parker Jr. was told to somewhat emulate. So, and that video is very funky too, with all the strange cameos that have seemingly nothing to do with the Ghostbusters film. Terry Garr and Danny DeVito and Jeffrey Tambor and Peter Falk, but it's Peter Falk. What didn't I like about Ghostbusters? Well, I didn't like the film initially because I didn't respond to Bill Murray's character. I found him kind of bullying. I'm not a fan of shock humor, where literally shock humor where people get electrocuted. It's a kink with me. I just don't think it's a funny slapstick bit, and it's just kind of bullying. And I was a somewhat sensitive film goer, and I would look at things very critically, analytically, in a certain way that nobody else did, and probably nobody else wanted to. But it benefited me as an artist. So I ended up with a BAFTA and a Peabody, so it turned out okay. And let me bring up the elephant in the room, which is when people talk about politics in films, Ghostbusters has politics in it. They're manifest. And even the director, Ivan Reitman, has said as much. And even in the documentary that's come with this 4K release, the first thing Dan Aykroyd says is point out that the film was made in the Reagan era, and that the villains are the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, organization, a regulatory agency that had only been started 14 years earlier, basically in 1970, by Richard Nixon, a Republican president, because the Ohio River literally caught on fire. And that was at a time when people could have a collectively rational view of science and the environment. And so I don't mind, I'm a satirist, and I have no problem with mocking, people all over, left or right or center, as long as you do it fair and not with cruelty or hatred. The comic cast of Ghostbusters comes from the background of Second City Comedy and National Lampoon, the magazine, and so that has the spirit of that. And they were sometimes, but that humor was often to me kind of cruel and bullying also, and that manifested in some of the movies. And this is also an area when Ronald Reagan was president, and Ronald Reagan's presidency was marked by a very serious anti-environmental attitude.
The automobile, sure, today it's kind of a villain in everyone's mind because of so-called smog and traffic congestion and all.
I just didn't like the way the characters presented, and once again, there's kind of a bullying tone to the film, and so, but certainly one of the biggest laugh lines I've ever heard in a movie theater is, of course, this line.
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Like I said, simply because I didn't respond to the material didn't mean that that audience wasn't rolling with that film from the get-go, and it was. And it was obvious it was a hit. And it was also obvious whatever my feelings towards it, my ambivalency towards it, because there were things I did like in it, is that I could see that it was like, it's kind of cool when you see like a cultural phenomenon being born, and it'll happen in every generation. And I definitely knew that Ghostbusters was something that was, happening right there. And, what I did like about the film, of course, is, the look of it. It's a very New York looking film, and Ivan Reitman even said he wanted to make a New York kind of movie, and he totally succeeded. It's got a beautiful visual sheen to it, and that's courtesy, of course, of one of the things I really like about the film is the cinematography by the great Laszlo Kovacs, just a master. Ivan Reitman deserves credit for the direction because he's quite an underrated, I think, comedy director, and he does handle that material, because at that time also, in the 80s, that was the first time a comedy film came out with that level of special effects. Ghostbusters cost about $25–30 million, which is quite a huge budget and a pretty big risk for the studio. And the only reason Bill Murray made the film is if Columbia Pictures financed his pet project, the very underrated, unique The Razor's Edge.
He left behind money and privilege.
I think we need to talk.
Okay, let's talk. Seal talk.
To brave the danger of living, to face the adventure of loving, to gamble his life on a chance as narrow as the razor's edge. Bill Murray.
This isn't the old Mr. Sunshine.
The Razor's Edge, rated PG-13. Starts tomorrow at a theater near you.
Not available on physical media, by the way, or I should say Blu-ray. And certainly deserves a 4K restoration because it was filmed in 70mm and is a true epic. And it's interesting because Bill Murray, I guess you could say, did a spiritual trilogy, starting with The Razor's Edge, Ghostbusters, and then Scrooged. When he came back to filmmaking, or films 4 years later, because he was very despondent over the box office and critical failure of The Razor's Edge, which is a very noble failure if there ever was one. Like I said, Sigourney Weaver is amazing, and she completely steals the film, and I think she's got the best lines in the film.
You don't act like a scientist.
They're usually pretty stiff.
You're more like a game show host.
Now, one of the things I really didn't like about the film is the introduction of Ernie Hudson as the new Ghostbuster, because to me it was so perfunctory and so devoid of giving this very talented actor anything to do besides this very unfunny line about him needing just to believe anything to get a job, which I remember that joke landed with a thud in the theater. It wasn't funny, and I just was kind of angry at the film right there, because I was like, come on, you can't think of another way to bring this character in that's got a cooler backstory, especially after this cool montage of showing the Ghostbusters blowing up across America. and some guy just walks off the street and says, yeah, whatever, I'll believe it, just give me a job. Well, apparently, of course, there was a bigger backstory for Ernie Hudson, and he was quite unhappy about the fact that his part was substantially cut down to give more time to Bill Murray. And that's a shame because they never really integrate him with the team very well, I don't feel, even though he's got a couple of really good moments. Particularly, maybe one of the best scenes in the film that's kind of just a pure straight scene. And it's when Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson are talking in the Ectomobile about what's really going on.
Judgment Day.
Judgment Day.
Every ancient religion has its own myth about the end of the world.
Myth? Ray, has it ever occurred to you that maybe the reason we've been so busy lately is because the dead have been rising from the grave?
But I find the ending very, it's a really, once again, it's a high concept, brilliant idea for a film, and they pull it off. They manage to go from laughs to scares to this kind of fun, epic adventure feel at the end, and it works really well. It's the thing for me, like Ghostbusters has almost zero emotional depth. There are little moments in the film that have some, little bits there, but overall the film doesn't really have an arc for Bill Murray to do, and I wish they would have given him a little more from smartass to believer, and he does have that, but it's not, super played out, I think, as well as it could be. But it's a nice moment when they all come together at the end to battle Gozar. And once again, in the theater, that was just, I like those moments when you're seeing something that's, the audience is responding to, and it's working in the way that it's exactly as the movie intended to. And so after the movie, my friends were always dread to ask me what I thought of the film, and then when I told them, they groaned and probably vowed they would never go see another film with me, and then they went to go see with Top Gun with me, and they really didn't want to go see a film with me again, but we can talk about that some other time. But I just wanted to talk about my experience with Ghostbusters, which opened at #1 that weekend and stayed #1 for 7 weeks and was the second highest grossing film of 1984 after Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, which I absolutely loved, by the way, and I'm one of the big defenders of that film. And so my tastes aren't completely contrarian. And so speaking of contrarian, why would I own a film that I have that much ambivalence about? Well, for the very reasons I just said. I love the look of it, I love the style, and it has a certain, of course, nostalgic quality for me. Because I do believe it's not just lightning in a bottle, it's a ghost in a bottle, it's a ghost in a trap. And you can really only catch it once. And I'm okay with them trying, and, for fans of the film, if it's out there, that's great. I just feel for me personally, like, no matter my feelings for it, this film is it. I've never seen any other films. I have no desire to see any other films because obviously I didn't love this one, and I own this one, and I'm ambivalent about it. But one of the reasons why I think this is worth owning is because it looks absolutely spectacular. Sony is fantastic at mastering films for discs, and this is no exception. It has a beautiful cinematic sheen to it. I can't tell if there's any scrubbing done to it or not, but it has the proper amount of grain to me. The blacks are really black. It looks fantastic, and Laszlo Kovacs' cinematography really shines on this disc. There's 2 discs, one the 4K and the other is a Blu-ray with the special features and documentaries, etc., etc. So worth going into if you're a fan. For sure, if you're a fan, you should definitely own this. There's also a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, which is fantastic. And rewatching it, once again, towards the end of the film, when they're all standing there together, crossing the streams, it's a nice moment that I wish they would have played up even a little more, but it works fine. And it, it does bring that nostalgia chill to me and that feeling of what it was like to be a teenager in the 80s. And sometimes it was bad, and sometimes it wasn't all bad. And that was a fun Friday night, no matter what my friends said about going to the movies with me. So thank you for retro viewing, thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe if you liked what you saw, and even if you didn't like it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side.
Will you please leave?
And then she threw me out of her life.